Siberia. A vast and unique landscape that has become known for its dense forests such as the taiga, massive mountain ranges such as the Ural, and overall rugged terrain. Within these remote backlands of Russia exist some of the most mysterious phenomena on planet Earth, from indigenous myths to modern unexplainable events. On Lake Baikal, Evenki legends tell of ghost soldiers that on foggy days in winter can be seen charging across the ice on horseback, only for it to crack and the soldiers to sink into the icy depths. To this day, the people of Lake Baikal claim to see the same soldiers charging across the ice. But that's not all. Remote Siberia is also a hotspot for other unexplained activity, both above and beneath the surface of its remote, massive lakes. UFO sightings, as well as bright lights emanating from the aquatic depths, have been seen by fishermen and indigenous people for decades. In addition to these strange sightings of unknown objects and bright lights, declassified Russian military documents from the 1980s disclose the deaths of 3 divers from an unknown encounter with giant humanoid creatures beneath the waters of Lake Issyk-Kul. Are these sightings and encounters extraterrestrial? Or could the answers to these mysteries be found in the traces of an ancient civilization at the bottom of the historic depths of Siberian lakes? Join us tonight on Into the Portal as we discuss these bizarre occurrences and investigate the possible links between an ancient time and modern phenomena.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Into the Portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay.
And we got a brand new episode.
Brand new episode. Woo! This one, I'm jinx already. I'm really, really excited for this one.
Oh.
It's kind of been like a long time coming for me, especially.
Definitely.
But we're heading into some remote territory of Siberia and other places as well.
Mm-hmm. So kind of adjacent to Mongolia, hey, where we covered the death worm.
Yeah.
Lake Baikal is basically situated just north of that.
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of what we're going to be looking at today, along with another lake known as Issyk-Kul.
That's right. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to kick it off with the intro of the Ghost Army because it was just such a cool story. Mm-hmm. And it's just a perfect example of how strange Siberia is. And the Lake Baikal and other deep lakes in Siberia and other places around there too. The Altai mountain range, which extends into Mongolia and stuff like that. But it's just a place where there's UFO sightings, USO sightings, so submerged. Mm-hmm. There's giant skeletons found. There's all kinds of bizarre
underwater
things.
swimmers.
Yeah.
Lights emanating from the depths of the lake.
This place is...
As well as ghosts.
Yeah.
Yes, like
as
we
well
covered. Yeah, so that story in particular was interesting. I wasn't actually able to corroborate the warlord that apparently sent this army, so it is a bit vague, but we get reports from locals around the lake that, especially on foggy days, they'll see these apparitions of horsemen, like, charging across the lake towards them, and it's like, it's bizarre, but it's there.
Can you imagine how terrifying that would be? Like, you're just fishing offshore, and then you got, like, a horde of ghost soldiers.
Like Mongols.
Yeah, like just...
Or no, sorry, they weren't Mongols.
They would have been, well...
That was a little...
They would have been, like, early...
Proto-Russian.
Mongols would be descendants of these people, possibly.
Exactly, yeah.
They're related. They're definitely on the Eurasian continent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, there's so many cool stories like that on the lake, and then there's others too with like ships that go out and disappear and then come back, and people think they've been gone
time
for
lapses.
Time lapses and all kinds of bizarre stuff.
So it's definitely a hot spot for a lot of paranormal activity, and that is what we're going to dive into.
Big time.
A little bit of everything.
So do you want to just give, like, I guess we should just maybe give a little bit of information on Siberia and like the lake.
Yeah.
You want me to give some details?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I mean, everybody knows Siberia. Mm-hmm. It's massive. It's
huge.
It's enormous. It's expansive. Some people think it's frozen all the time. That's actually not true. They have really warm summers, but they are short. But Siberia is basically just over 13 million square kilometers, and accounts for over over 77% of Russia's land area. So it's massive.
Wow.
Massive.
Okay.
And so Lake Baikal is located in this territory, as well as Lake Issyk-Kul. Both are massive lakes. Lake Baikal happens to be the largest freshwater body on planet Earth. Mm-hmm. It is also the deepest freshwater body because it is a rift lake. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
With Lake Okanagan, where we're from.
Very similar.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Like, I'm trying to... So yeah, it's 12,000 square miles of fresh water.
And it's super, super old. Like 30 million years old.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy to think.
So super old, super deep. What the heck is in this?
We don't know.
But yeah, the similarities to Okanagan Lake were really cool for us, obviously being from here and looking for the Ogopogo episode 2.
Yeah.
Because we were looking at Okanagan Lake and being like, holy moly, like this is deep. Like 800 feet plus just to the bottom, and then you got 750 meters of sediment in Okanagan Lake. And Lake Baikal is like double that, at least. Like it's like...
Well, wasn't it at its depth, at its deepest point, I remember reading it was like 1.4 miles deep, and then on top of that, there was about 4.5 miles of sediment. Yeah.
So just unbelievably
So
deep.
between 6 and 7 miles deep.
Yes.
From the surface of the water.
Total, which is a long way.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of hard to comprehend, to be honest.
Much.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the epicenter of the episode is, more or less.
Yes.
Like we said, we're venturing into some other territories for evidence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think we should.
All in the same continent, all in the same region. Yes. And then, again, like Lake Issyk-Kul, compared to Lake Baikal, Issyk-Kul actually means warm water, or warm lake, so it never actually freezes.
It has it's a saline lake, right? It has a little bit of salt. Like it's kind of like the Caspian Sea. And
again, it's connected to that rift, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's another reason for it's the warmth of the water.
There's no, that makes sense, obviously, because there's gases and things coming up from the rift.
And then people have actually, the thermal conductivity has been reported, and some people claim, because like you get these huge, like 3 mile long sphere or circular
formations on the ice.
Yeah, so it's like almost like a big ring.
Yeah, and they look like they're caused by UFOs.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people have been speculating as to what caused them, and actually I think in Astonishing Legends went out to Siberia in one of their earlier episodes, and they touched on this with the rings. And I think one of the theories that's definitely come up as like a scientific explanation is like you said, like there's gas.
Thermoconductive zones and like almost like these columns that would rise and create these sort of circular, and then and they also there was the whole idea that the Earth's rotation would actually result in the rotating of the ice in the middle, so that would kind of lead to this sort of circular formation.
So it's just a strange place.
Yeah, so that could be explained potentially, but there's a lot that really couldn't.
So shall we get into the juicy, the main course here to kind of launch it off?
No more appies.
No more appies. No more appies. That's a big appy, Siberia. Okay, so we're moving on to this. Like I said, this is the crux of the episode, and it is an event that took place in the 1980s. That began on Lake Baikal and then happened again on Lake Issyk-Kul.
Right.
You want me to kick this off?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so 1982, there is a special Russian military dive team doing exercises in Lake Baikal. Okay, they're called frogmen, which I thought was funny. I guess that's just the Russian version of the Navy SEAL, obviously, right?
I guess, yeah.
I wonder what they're called in Canada.
Good question.
Like the beavers. Or something like that. Anyway, so these frogmen, they're training in Lake Baikal, and they encounter some... Well, this is the part where you have this quote, right?
Yeah.
Because this was different. So basically, they're diving... They're using fresh water because it's a controlled environment more so than the ocean.
But it does mimic a lot of ocean circumstances because it is so big
because it is so massive. Right. So, anyway, everything's going smooth. It's all good. And they end up being down 150 meters. And they encountered... Go for it. Give this quote.
Well, at the depths of Baikal... They, quote, spied bizarrely shaped underwater vehicles that moved far faster than any technology the Soviet Navy was in possession of at the time. As if that weren't strange enough, the divers also claim that they came across a squad of silvery suited, clad, though clearly non-human beings. End quote. I'm just gonna end it there.
Yeah. So these guys are down there 150 meters. They first encounter machines that are unidentifiable.
Vehicles.
USOs.
Vehicles. Yeah, okay. That's very strange. They don't actually give a description at all of what shape, what size.
And this is the thing. There's accounts that just focus on the swimmers and then others that have both.
Yeah.
So we haven't been able to corroborate if both definitively happened, but definitely the swimmers happened. So after they saw these vehicles, they, like you said, they encountered, did you give the height? 3 meter tall, 9.84 feet.
Yeah.
Silvery humanoid swimmers ripping around them.
Massive people.
They had sphere-like helmets, no scuba tanks, and they were just flying around way too quick.
And there was a description that they had like some sort of like bubble helmet over their heads.
Yes, yeah, it was like a spherical helmet.
Yeah. And then there was other descriptions. There was one from a diver. This was actually not in Baikal, but he described something a little different with like these like big eyes that were kind of like halogen like eyes or something. But anyways,
almost as if the helmet had been removed.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah. Different circumstance though. But yeah, so these guys, 1982, it was kind of an interesting story, right? Because there was 2 different dive teams, and the one encountered these creatures.
Yeah.
And they warned the second group.
Yeah, so here's how the story goes. So they encountered these strange creatures.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we should probably let other dive teams know what's going on here.
Yeah.
So this is on Lake Baikal, and then about 1,500 miles southwest is Lake Issyk-Kul. I think that's right. I gotta double check that. But anyway, it's a little bit of a ways away, but again, super deep lake. So they get a visit from the Ministry of Defense of the USSR, Major V. Demenyenko. And he's the guy who lets them know what's going on. So he shows up and he's like, hey guys, we encountered some really bizarre stuff at this depth. So just keep an eye out for it, because obviously they were fascinated from a military perspective, but also just perplexed as to what this was. So anyway, the dive team on Lake Issyk-Kul, sure enough, they encounter the exact same thing around the same depth.
That's bizarre. Right? It's bizarre that the activity is happening simultaneously in 2 different locations, right? That they're kind of interacting with these Soviet military
forces. Is it just because it's the depth, or is it because is it just the territory that they managed to get into?
Maybe they're almost just like, it's almost like a reconnaissance sent out from like these swimmers, right? Because they're probably sensing like, hey, something's coming into our territory, therefore let's go see.
And that is the overarching question for this episode is, who the heck are these things? Exactly. What are these things? And what evidence is there to support that they exist or what they could be? And that's what we're going to get into. I'm stoked.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
So this is bizarre. So anyway, the second team, they encounter the same thing. They come back up and they're like, yep, they're down there. There's 9-foot plus humanoid swimmers down there. Yeah. And at first they were kind of thinking like, this is some sort of animal, right? Like this is some sort, it's humanoid looking, but this is, I mean, surely their first instinct isn't, this is an alien in a spacesuit. They're thinking this is bizarre, but let's catch it and find out what it is.
Exactly,
right? Yeah. So they send another team down, and the way it kind of reads in the Russian translated article is that it sounds kind of like rinky-dink, like they weren't, but I'm assuming 1980s Russian frogmen, they're going to have some half-decent equipment for trying to catch something underwater.
You'd hope.
I mean, you've seen, like those underwater spear gun nets and stuff. Yeah, you're going to have something, not just going down there with like a grocery bag and like and a piece of rope. So anyway, so they go down and they attempt, they encounter them again. They attempt to catch one of these and they are not successful.
No.
They get forced to the surface by an unknown force. Well, they presumably coming from these
unknown compelling force.
Presumably coming from these silver swimmers somehow, and they launch up to 50 feet out of the water. They've surfaced 150 meters in under seconds.
Seconds, yeah. It was like under 10 seconds.
And you are not supposed to do that, obviously. You're supposed to come up at checkpoints so that you can decompress and the oxygen,
and nitrogen in your cells.
So you don't get the bends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So of course these divers are shot out of the water and people see this. There's fishermen, there's people along the lake. There's locals, there's people out with their animals.
And I have a very interesting little anecdote to go along with that.
Anyway,
yeah.
These divers didn't make it, though, just to finish this off. There's a couple of them ended up brain damaged, and then others just died. They only had, one working decompression chamber?
Yes.
And they shoved them into it.
Well, they shoved 4 out of 7.
Right.
All 4 got brain damage because there's only supposed to be 2 persons in each chamber, max. And then on top of that, the leader was one of the unfortunate ones that died, along with 2 others of the team.
He just took one for the team, maybe.
Brutal, yeah.
Yeah, so super rough. And obviously this was not something that the Russian military would want to make public, but the public saw. And this ended up being declassified later. It
was. So. And it's very interesting, actually. After all these events happened in 1982, and these swimmers were reported lurking in the depths, there was actually a detailed analysis of Lake Baikal and the events of what happened to those people and the ensuing reprimands. So, this is a quote here. Quote, "The order consisted of a detailed analysis of Baikal Lake events and ensuing reprimands. It was supplemented by an information bulletin from the headquarters of the Engineering Forces of the Ministry of Defense, USSR. The bulletin listed numerous deepwater lakes where there had been registered sightings of anomalous phenomena, including appearances of underwater creatures analogous to the Baikal type, descent and ascent of giant discs and spheres, and powerful luminescence emanating from the deep, etc." End quote. So it's not isolated by any means, and it was officially recognized by the USSR. Yeah. So that's huge.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I would say so. And just to go back, I found this note here from what you just mentioned earlier, the Black Sea, where the diver who encountered the one
shark diver.
He was
like looking for sharks or something.
Looking for sharks, and then I had a few accounts too because of other divers encountering the same thing. So Black Sea, this was in the 1990s, same sort of thing. Swimmers around 9 feet tall, but without the same helmets. One of them was a shark diver, another was, I think, looking for amber.
Really?
Not for you, but for I think the Black Sea, deep in the Black Sea, is one of the locations where you can find amber made for used in jewelry and stuff.
Interesting.
So these things are that's ocean.
So that was in the Black Sea. Sorry, what year was
that? I just have 1990s. Okay. I don't have an exact year.
I have the same sort of it's 1990s, no exact date, but this was the one that you just mentioned where this guy named Borokivov.
Okay.
Borokivov, he was diving at a depth of only 8 meters. And he encountered 3 giant silvery humanoid swimmers with milky white faces, webbed hands, and bulging eyes with fish-like tails. So that's more like a mermaid, to be honest.
That's more that's more merman territory.
Again, this is early 1990s, no exact date. A hand glider named Povalyov, there's a lot of Y's in that name, was flying over the Leningrad area where there's many lakes, and he actually noticed what he thought were 3 huge fish on the surface. As he glided closer, he realized that they were humanoids in these silvery suits again. He recorded his event in his book called The Flying Dutchman that was released in 1995.
The Flying Dutchman.
So, yeah, that was from a Pravda article, so I'm not sure how much stock to take in that one, but very curious, right?
Interesting.
So that, again, just points to this idea that, Lake Baikal is very central for these anomalous events, but it does spread. Right. And I feel like that just is part and parcel of the nature of these vast rural areas that are mostly uninhabited and are almost like the last sort of playground or wild frontier for these things that are on the fringes of what we understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the question for me is okay, these things are down there. Mm-hmm. Where do they come from? Are they an evolutionary offshoot? We're going to get into that. Are they aliens? Mm-hmm. Did they come from somewhere else and there's bases underwater? Some people believe that. There's some wild theories about that type of thing. Are they aliens but not from are they aliens but they're not from light years away? Yeah, it's interdimensional, or it's something else, they've been here all along. There's so many different ways to go. Things. But I think we should kick it off with UFOs because there's so many sightings. Lake Baikal, Siberia, also in other across the Eurasian continent.
True.
So you had that one that was a crash, didn't you? Or did you want to hold on to that?
Yeah. No, we can get into that for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, this was a downed aircraft. Again, this was the same year as the Silver Swimmer sighting,
Right.
in 1982, May 26th. And this is according to Mikhail Gerstein, who was a huge part of this SEPCA. It was basically an initiative put forth by the USSR in response to all these events and things, just to form some sort of investigative unit. And then, so his report goes as follows. There was a loss of communications with MiG-21 aircraft.
Okay.
And it subsequently went down. And at the same time, there was a UFO sighted at a height of 1,500 meters. So you get unexpected interference of communications, crash, sighting of UFO.
Trifecta.
And just to top it off, this is really cool.
Yep.
So the day after this aircraft went down, a search team. I can't talk today. A search team comprised of a junior sergeant named Pan Yukov and a private named Kunin. They were in the Poverino area forest, which is where the crash occurred.
Okay.
So this is a lot more West Russia, northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly in the same area, but it's still...
No, it's still in Russia, though. But anyways, so they were walking through this forest trying to find the wreckage, and they walked into this clearing and observed a humanoid entity. This is a quote. It was no less than 3.5 meters tall, dressed in a silvery with greenish hues clothing. After the entity fled the site of the incident, eyewitnesses observed an explosion behind the trees and flight of a luminescent object that left a slightly luminescent trail.
Interesting.
End quote.
So once again, we've got the height.
Yeah.
The sort of 9+ feet and the silver suits. So that's the connection. So it's like, is there a link between a UFO site that's obviously like a terrestrial, like it's landed on land, it's not submerged in the ocean, or in the lake, rather.
Yeah.
But is there a connection there?
Yeah. Right?
So
that's the question.
The interesting thing with that is, like, when people think of unidentified objects, it's UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And then when we were looking into this, I discovered, basically for me, like, the idea of a USO.
Yeah.
You know, these submerged unidentified objects, much like the machines that the divers encountered before the actual swimmers themselves. Were these machines some sort of reconnaissance for these swimmers or something like that they saw first? I don't know. Like, that's my explanation, I guess. But anyway,
very curious.
So the idea of a USO, and this is all over the world, and there's some crackpot theories out there about this kind of thing, but there's others that are not. One of the crazier, kookier ones I thought was kind of fun when I was looking at it is there's people that believe that there's underwater alien bases all over the world, and one of them is just off the coast of Malibu, California. Mm-hmm. And I looked at a picture of this thing, and people found it on Google Earth, and they think it's got a perfectly flat top with like columns coming down underneath it. It looks like it's being supported and stuff. And geologists look at it and say, yeah, no, it's just a natural formation. It definitely doesn't look natural, but I don't believe it's an alien base or anything like that. But people believe these are a thing. Same with Lake Baikal. So supposedly in 2009, there were photographs taken from like satellite images that looked beneath the surface, and basically same sort of thing. Found some obscure looking structures that some people thought looked like a space for flying saucers to submerge and land and dock.
Sorry,
basically.
which lake is this?
This is Baikal.
Oh,
this was
okay.
Totally unsubstantiated. Like, just what was this from? It was like from a Ancient Origins or something type website kind of thing, right?
You can sort of use anecdotal support evidence from people that say that they see like glowing.
Well, this is exactly. So the idea of there's orbs that have been seen in Russia above the water, like that even comes in like the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Right.
Indigenous Mansi people had seen orbs and things like that, very similar to the USOs that fishermen have seen on Baikal and on Issyk-Kul and other lakes, where there's these giant luminescent balls of light deep underneath the water.
And then they shoot into the sky.
Yes, they right.
And they go flying away.
Yeah.
Where
So the
are
question
they
is, do they originate from under the water though, or do they originate from somewhere else?
Yeah.
Which direction, right? Like that's the question for me.
That's
because
curious.
This lake is so deep and so ancient, and Issyk-Kul as well, and just Siberia in general.
Yeah.
And we've got evidence of that in caves that I'm Super excited.
That we're gonna get into pretty.
But
quick
people have been
here,
seeing. So I have an example here though. So oh my gosh, these names. Vyacheslav Laveratich. Mm-hmm. Sorry, man. I tried my best. A researcher. So he was a researcher from, I think, the University of Moscow or something like that. I lost it. Anyway, no, sorry, different person. My bad. Disregard that. He was on a search and rescue team.
Oh.
This guy. Anyway, he was recalling an incident where they were out on the lake, I guess, presumably for search and rescue, or maybe just training. Anyway, they were on the lake, and they were blinded by a giant glowing disc that came underneath the boat and then surfaced and flew away into the sky. It blinded them for several seconds. They couldn't see anything.
A disc? So how big would that have been?
So it would have, under the water, it looked like a circle, like a orb, and then it surfaced and he said it looked like a disc. He didn't give a size. I said it was probably, just massive. Oh wait, no, he does give a size. 700 meters.
What?
In diameter. That can't be accurate.
700 centimeters? Crazy.
He said it was, the spectacle was awesome, beautiful, and shocking. It was like a yacht. It was like a
search and rescue
vessel.
Okay.
And you have to remember that we're talking about a lake, like Baikal and Issyk-Kul, but lake, it's just like an ocean.
Yeah.
Like if you're on one side looking across, you don't see the other side, depending on where you're standing, obviously.
Right.
So it's like massive.
That's crazy.
Other orbs, obviously, Skinwalker Ranch has orb sightings. They're all over the world. But these ones, underwater.
And I didn't actually come across, orbs was more your area of research, but, did you come across any reported attacks or anything, that would be similar to, say, a Skinwalker, where there's singe marks found where dogs used to be or something?
No, I couldn't find anything like that on Baikal. Just
locals?
Straight sightings,
Yeah.
I mean, in 1977, there was
Maybe
another one.
They're smart enough not to mess with it.
I get, they just get used to it, right?
Right.
This is another interesting one where they're not a boat on the surface. 1977, there was a team who was in a submersible, so like a smaller submarine, 1,200 meters at a depth of 1,200 meters, and they encountered orbs at that depth. So they turned off their spotlights to try to see how far the light would penetrate. And basically, they were blinded by an unusual glow, and they surfaced, and they couldn't explain what it was. And basically,
sorry, what year was that?
1977. And basically, people have interviewed people along the lake, both lakes, about this, and for decades, people have seen mysterious balls of light, flame-like balls of light above the lake.
Wow, okay.
From fishermen, workers, search and rescue people, military, for decades.
Very reputable people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It ain't swamp gas.
No. It really makes me think. I'm just sort of diving into that Corso book we got from Christofferson over at our Strange Skies podcast. And he had some really interesting things to say about, well, obviously the infighting amongst the military units, so like the Air Force, the Navy, and whatever else, and the Army, and how like the Navy was like freaking out because they were dealing with very similar phenomena underneath the surface of the ocean on their bases and stuff, and they were freaking out because they don't know how to defend themselves. And so anyways, that's a whole other side note, and it's a crazy book that it's very entertaining, though. I'm really enjoying it. I wish the font was a little bit bigger though, because my eyes hurt when I'm reading it, but that's just me being a baby.
No, but it makes total sense. Like, I have a stat here, like 50% of UFO encounters are connected with oceans and 15% are connected with lakes. So there's a big water element for sightings, obviously.
Very cool. I'm starting to picture like War of the Worlds, hey, where these massive tripod things are going to rise out of the
up all
depths.
Water or something like that.
Well, then, sucking up water, like that was that 1994 Australian incident that I just looked into this morning.
Right.
Very similar, but we'll get into that with like theories and stuff.
Yeah.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
No, I'm not going to get too far. I don't want to get too far ahead.
All right.
All I can say, though, is that these balls of light are definitely not swamp gas.
No.
Because that's what the orb explanations around the world have been attributed to in the past. And the guy, I can't remember the name of the guy, but whoever came up with that, like, he didn't even intend for it to get out of hand for explanations for UFOs. Just everything, swamp gas for everything. Because the actual likelihood of methane rising and
creating a ball
of fire that big and that frequent. And here's the other thing: it moves in non-ballistic motion, so
it's not going up. It's going side to side.
It's going wherever it wants. Yeah, it is moving in any direction it wants.
Another interesting side note would be if it is this swamp gas explosion, whatever, then why the heck aren't there any fires started from this?
Good question. Good question.
Let's put on our thinking caps here. And,
all right.
Anyways, yeah. So
USOs, that's a thing.
USOs as UFOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, one and the same.
Perhaps. So we're trying to link these to the swimmers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, potentially. I mean, loosely, we're trying to...
Because of the adjacency of the sightings, right, of the military seeing first these little crafts are moving very fast.
Yeah.
They didn't say anything about a glow in that report specifically.
No.
But they were beyond technological capabilities of the Soviets at that time.
Yeah.
And of anyone at that time, I would assume. Like, like America, whatever. It's not like America's, like,
and it's not
sending out little submersibles to, like, Baikal to spy on the Russians.
It's not one of those situations where you can explain it away by being like, oh, this is, advanced government military technology that they're running. No, this is the military.
Exactly, yeah.
So they're not, I mean... Why would they have one branch that has special information that the other doesn't? That seems counterintuitive.
And another thing too, just to add to the more like objectivity of this account in particular, and how it couldn't actually, like you already mentioned, the fact that local fishermen and people around the lake had seen these people actually shoot up out of the water.
Yeah.
And I actually have, there's a guy, Mikhail Demidenko, who is a well-known Russian writer. I couldn't find much information on him. I feel like it's all in Russian. But anyways.
Well, he was supposedly... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. He read this account. He read the account of the 1982, The Swimmers. And while he was on assignment for the Union of Writers, this was in 1986, so 4 years later, he spent some time at Lake Baikal. And there he talked to local fishermen, and they observed, how these frogmen were basically propelled. His quote says 10 to 15 meters up over the water.
Right.
So that would be approximately 30 to 40 feet, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it just says here, the locals never found out why the military behaved in that manner. Like, I don't know if they meant to. But
yeah, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, very curious, though. This guy, Demidenko, he'll come into play again with our theories and other sort of archaeological evidence of perhaps these humanoid swimmers.
Or something linked to them, perhaps.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Is that where we're heading, then?
I would say so. I think we should take a quick break, though, hey?
Yeah.
Let's do a quick break for our friend over at Creepsville Podcast, the lovely Isabella from Down Under in Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my terrible Australian accent.
Nice try, yeah. But we made a friend in Australia, and she's got a really great show. So here's a promo from Creepsville.
Hi, I'm Bella, and I've got a podcast called Creepsville. It's all about the spoopy and spooky and the creepy. If you like ghosts and paranormal, if you like murder, if you like urban legends, or if you're just a weirdo like me who loves all of the above, you've come to the right place. I even make the occasional joke. Find me on Libsyn and on iTunes and give it a listen. Out every second Saturday. Subscribe now.
All right, so make sure you guys go and check out Creepsville Podcast. And now we are moving into some exciting territory because we're going to be talking about
some archaeological evidence of ancient civilizations, giants potentially in the area.
Yes, ancient civilizations and ancient bones.
Well, because we're trying to tie this into again the swimmers.
Yes.
So these are 3-meter tall swimmers. So therefore, we need some big skeletons.
We need to find some big evidence.
Big evidence. Yeah.
Indeed.
And we did. Well, there has been reports. Beginning in the early 1900s. So this came from a group of Georgian boys, as they're described in the account. And essentially what they did, I'm not even sure what they were actually doing on the waters. This wasn't actually on Lake Issyk-Kul. This is in the Georgian National Park.
Right. So this is south. This is a ways away, but it's the same idea, and there's the similarities. There's so much crossover that it all ties together for sure.
And there's another instance much later on in the 2000s that actually supports this initial claim from the Georgian boys.
Okay.
So again, this was an enormous forested area known as the Bajormi Karaguli National Park.
Nice job.
And anyways, so yeah, there is a lake there, I suppose. I don't know what the name of it is. But, yeah, so these boys apparently were diving around.
I don't know if they're just like looking for...
They're just moseying around.
I don't know.
Adventure, I guess.
Collecting rocks, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? Fishing? Who
Even
knows?
Just judging from the character, say, of the Dyatlov group, if anyone's ever read those books, and just how adventure was a lot more different than what we conceive of it today. It was harsh, it was hard, and it was a thing of honor, really.
For sure.
It was a lot more serious.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of picturing these Georgian boys to be similar to that Dyatlov group. Like, youthful, but...
adventurous and...
enthusiastic
very
and
much so.
Serious about it. And so anyways...
they're diving down into
They dove down. Apparently they found a cave situated inside a mountain that they had to dive under to get to. So when they got inside the mountain, they found giant human skeletons. And the number of skeletons was unclear, as well as, again, like I said, the name of the lake.
Yeah.
And it's just very curious because, we do see numerous accounts throughout the 20th century into the 2000s, and it is in different lakes, different areas. I know. But all in the same
bizarre
continent.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and now, so then...
I wonder with the whole bones thing, for like not being sure exactly how many, skeletons or bodies there were, if they were intact completely, or if it was hard to tell because it was like, partial skeletons, and then there's other, bones and stuff, so you're like sort of, would have to piece it together to see if it was maybe a full 2 or 3 individuals or whatever.
It was such a vague account. I'm curious because it did also mention the fact that these boys were terrified of what they found, essentially. Right. And they wasn't like... something that they went and bragged about initially. I think it took them a few years before they even told their story.
Especially if you had to dive somewhere to get there. Like, it's very cool and interesting, but freaky. Like, even when I was in Fiji...
like, what if you stumbled across? Like, is there a giant... like, what if there's, like, a beast and they're eating these people, and that's why the skeletons are there?
And that's what we joked about when I went on that trip with my sister to Fiji, and we dove into an underwater cave. It was, like, not super deep, though. You only had to go down maybe, like, 7 or 8 feet, and then just, like, under a little short thing, and then you're up in this cave.
Cool.
But, like, it's terrifying. You're thinking, like, what the heck? Yeah, like, what? Yeah, it's freaky.
Especially because it's all dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that was the earliest account that I found, and then from there it kind of goes into the 1930s.
Yeah.
And that goes back to Issyk-Kul.
Issyk-Kul is... I want to go there, man. Like, I really want to go to Siberia. Like, Lake Baikal and Issyk-Kul, they just sound so cool.
Yeah.
And they're vacation spots for sure. Like, in the summertime, it's warm, and you can go swimming, and it's
I was
really
on their
nice.
tourist website.
Yeah, maybe we will. How cool would that be? You go do a live or a show from the shores of Issyk-Kul.
Ooh, that'd be sweet.
Something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, this place has been, Navy dive site for decades and decades. It's been, and you've got information.
Yeah, since the 1860s. So that makes it one of the earliest modern dive sites. And yeah, it just has a rich history of paranormal encounters, including, what was the name of this guy here? Okay, so this is a Russian researcher of the paranormal named Grabowski. And, no. This was the guy conducting the interview. Okay. My bad.
That's okay.
Yeah, we don't actually have names of the people who made the discovery, but essentially this guy conducted the interview with what is described as reluctant witnesses. It was a man and his friends who had been fishing, and this is on the shores of Issyk-Kul, and they had discovered this cave, but it was not easily accessible. They had to actually come back with tools and kind of like chisel their way into it, is what I read. And so they found 3 human skeletons.
Okay.
And this is the clincher.
Yeah.
They were more than 3 meters tall.
So once again, we got 9+ feet.
9+ feet. And these skeletons were adorned with decorations that were like these silver amulets, pure silver amulets that were almost in the shape of what I'm picturing in my head to be like the Batman logo. Like, they were described as a bat.
Really?
Yeah, with wings spread.
Interesting.
And you get the same description of these men. These are men, they're not boys.
Okay.
Being terrified of what they've discovered, and they didn't want to report it. They held on to the amulets. According to some accounts, they melted the silver down, kept a little bit for themselves, but sold the rest of it.
That's too bad.
I know, right? Why would they?
It's one of those things, though, where I guess it's like the experience of essentially the uncanny. You're seeing something that is presumably humanoid, but not... you can't fathom the size. It's
it is
just
other.
Like, yes, it is other. Yes.
It's very cool. And so essentially, actually there was a small piece that had been saved, and Soviet scientists that studied it said they couldn't determine its age.
Interesting.
So again, very...
And you know what's something I'd like to point out here too? And this is slightly off base perhaps, but I find it interesting that this whole, like, we're finding, 9 foot, like 9+ feet, 3 meters in all these different accounts and stuff, right? So there's similarities there, but that also just makes me think of other unidentified creatures that are also, I mean, is it just because humans are obsessed with things that are being bigger than them? But we got Bigfoot, 7 to 10 feet. You got the Flatwoods monster, like 8 to 10 feet tall. They're all in the same range.
The Ohio grassman.
All these creatures are within the same range of size a lot of the time. I just thought that was interesting.
That is actually very interesting.
Anyway.
Oh my gosh, what if these giant skeletons are actually Bigfoot?
Or Bigfoot descendants. Or ancestors, rather. Right?
You'd think the physiology would point to something, especially in the foot, right?
Right. But we've got some interesting tidbits on offshoots of human ancestors as well, so...
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the cave finds are just... I mean, that
kind of kicked it off, right?
Yeah.
And just sort of sparked a lot of interest. And it was kind of funny. There were so many articles that basically were just copy-pasted from other websites, and it just was like an endless like loop feeding into each other, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of these articles, after they mentioned this find at Lake Issyk-Kul, there would be this random a sentence, that basically says, it's like, interestingly, it was the same sentence in every single article. It was obviously copy-pasted. It's like, a Kyrgyz legend does mention a submerged city in the lake. The city's ruler, King Assonos, was a creature with long asinine ears. And I don't understand where that actually plays into, because they don't say he's a giant. They don't say anything. It just says, like, a submerged city in the lake.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, I was trying, I'm going through the interwebs trying to find some info on this thing.
Russian information is impossible to find online.
Yeah, and we even have our Russian myths book that didn't have a single mention about that.
No.
But yeah, so essentially this legend references a sunken city on the bottom of Lake Issyk-Kul. The last ruler of the ancient city had been this king with here it is, okay. King Assonos, a giant with long ears. A giant. I'm not sure how, this is from the eventchronicle.com, so again. But then I have another reference. This is from KyrgyzTravel.com.
Okay.
And they describe in more detail this myth. So this is a quote. In pre-Islamic legend, the king of Assonos had donkey's ears. He would hide them and order each of his barbers to be killed to hide his secret. One barber yelled the secret into a well, but he did not cover the well afterwards. The well water rose and flooded the kingdom. The kingdom to this day is under the waters of Lake Issyk-Kul. This is how the lake was formed, according to legend. Other legends say that 4 drowned cities lie at the bottom of the lake. Substantial archaeological finds indicating the presence of an advanced civilization in ancient times have been made in the shallow waters of the lake. End quote.
Very cool.
So mind-blowing,
cool. So is there potential connection here to the idea of obviously ancient lost civilizations underwater? Or that ended up underwater.
And populations that were substantially larger than what we know today.
Right.
This is a pre-Islamic myth, too, so this is old.
Well, totally. And you know what? This has to tie into... I'm going to just give some information on the Scythians then, because that has to originate from them. Yeah. Because the Islamic part of that makes sense with this, because the Scythians were very early peoples that were nomadic horse-riding peoples, basically.
Were they pre-Islamic, or were they Islamic?
They were...
I think they were pre-Islamic. From what I read, they were pre.
No, for sure, because, I mean, Herodotus talks about them.
Right.
And this is I guess that would have been 430 BC, but they were around way before that, so... like 2500 BC, basically up into Siberia, nomadic peoples and stuff. But again, we got Herodotus mention.
Yeah, gotta get him in there.
But that's probably where that myth and legend came from. And again, myths and legends of indigenous peoples and, descendants of them so often have some basis in truth. I'm not saying that there's definitively a functioning lost city in Baikal and Issyk-Kul, or in Georgia, or in the Black Sea, or where these other sightings take place, but there's something going on.
There's remnants,
and
maybe.
There's definitely there's evidence of civilization, and
but
whether
like living
or not
remnants, maybe.
Exactly. So I don't know. I'm this is just so cool to me. Like, this gets my juices flowing like crazy because I love the ancient stuff and the idea that there could have been a technological offshoot. I don't think it's ancient alien kind of thing where we gathered technology from ancient aliens or anything like that.
We're given like almost Prometheus style or something.
I don't think it's like that.
No.
But there's definitely something more here that we don't know.
There's elements that we do not know.
Absolutely. So
just state the obvious there. Okay.
Yeah, we're just like Monster Quest now. We'd be like
very compelling.
Yeah.
Oh my god, your joke earlier.
Yeah, where it's like, all right, we're here looking for the Yeren. I'm going to use my trousers to look for the Yeren. I put them on one leg at a time, and we're going to walk into the woods. The woods is made up of trees. Like,
large bundles of things known as trees.
Creates the forest. Like, thanks, buddy.
Alrighty.
Anyway, okay. No, we're not going to be like Monster Quest. That's not what we're going to be like.
Please not. Yeah, that's...
Okay. I want to move into something here that I thought was really interesting, just to stay on the topic of caves, because I've got some interesting stuff from a cave in Siberia. So, two things. The first, researchers discovered evidence of a group of archaic humans that were existing outside of Africa for more than 30,000 years ago. So this is linked to the ancient Denisovans, which I didn't know what that was, but it's basically a subspecies of Homo, like in the Homo genus.
Oh yeah, so Homo habilis, right? Homo erectus.
It's in there somewhere, and there's remains of them found in Siberia and other places around there. But basically, this was really cool. They found a cave.
You said this was 30,000 years ago?
So this particular cave was dated to 30,000 years ago. Okay. But there's skeletal remains of these Denisovan, like...
That go back further?
Yeah, up to 70,000 years.
Poof.
So, but what was cool about this find was that they discovered the remains of a 5 to 10-year-old Denisovan girl, and they extracted DNA from her, from the fingers. And they noticed some differences in the skeletal remains without even doing DNA analysis. But what was so fascinating is that they did this, and the DNA came back as totally different, like not totally different, but different sequence than the other subspecies of human that were known to exist at the time. So they were clearly interbreeding with other Neanderthals and like ancient peoples. And so it's just really cool. It's not like crazy profound, but it is kind of, for me, especially because it's like, this is an unknown species of subhuman. Right? This is an ancient human that's different than Neanderthal, different than Denisovan, different, like it's slightly different.
So it allows for these, it provides a precedent for minute differentiations or mutations.
Right. It's the idea that could there have been some sort of a similar, it's proof that there's things that there were subspecies of human that we didn't know of. So could there be something like, it's a jump, but we see something giant similar. 9-foot humanoids that we don't know anything about. Is that sort of something along the same line of thinking, that there was an ancient subspecies of human that went a different direction, away from how we evolved?
Exactly, because who's to say that, we get hairy mountain men that are giant species living in the mountains. We get more amphibious-looking, silvery, like, webbed feet and hands with big, googly eyes in the water. It's just, I'm thinking...
And this is tens of thousands of years of evolution. And if it's happening out of our sight... So wait a second.
So her skeleton was dated to 70,000 years ago?
No, the skeleton was 30,000, but then I have another 70... This is another find. So... Again, this was in the Altai mountain range, so this basically extends from like Siberia into Mongolia and in the Gobi and like kind of that area, I believe. 2008, Denisovan Cave, so just another cave inhabited by basically
Same
ancient
people.
humans, right? Mm-hmm. And they found a, what's it called? It's like a bracelet, but there's another word for it. It's like a ancient, what's it called? It's like a bangle.
Amulet,
a bangle, I think it's called. Something like that. Anyway, they dated this to 60,000 years.
Oh, okay.
Now, this bracelet was... we've got the link, so this is in our sources. This was it exhibited the craftsmanship that wasn't possible until the Neolithic, like 8,000 BC, supposedly.
Well, that we knew of. Now it's a new precedent.
Right? So
pushes it back.
And there's debate. Not all archaeologists agree with this.
Yeah.
But some suggest that there's evidence of high-speed drilling, and the finish and the quality of the bracelet would have taken such special skill and tools that they would have not had that at the time, based on other finds. And this basically suggests that our ancient ancestors, up to 70,000 years ago, could have quite possibly had much greater technology and just capabilities than we thought was possible. You know, and moving all the way up to the Neolithic in 8,000 BC, and that's when we think that people were starting to figure things out.
Interesting. Yeah.
That I find interesting because we've got, just before that, obviously, DNA evidence of a different subspecies of human.
Yeah. It's very compelling. It's
pretty cool.
Rewriting the narrative. I came across an article this morning, too, before we sat down to record, that was talking about, again, this does go back to the same area, the Georgian area, and this is what I kind of alluded to. So this is a find from 2008.
Okay.
So essentially, these researchers in Georgia had heard a story about a burial changer with a giant contained within it from a herdsman in an extremely remote location. So this is a protected area of the Georgian National Park, the Bajormi or whatever National Park. Huge area, covers more than 80,000 hectares of native forest.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it's got like 3 different regions that are kind of included. So the total area is 851 square kilometers. So a lot of
It's a lot of territory.
Yeah, and so these Georgian researchers basically were following up on this account told by the herdsman, who had entered an ancient stone crypt somewhere in the mountains, only to find an incredible sight. This is a quote. 2 giant-sized human skeletons sitting on chairs at a large table. The team of Georgian researchers hiked into the wilderness with the hope of investigating the discovery, this site being located high up in the Lesser Caucasus mountain range. And then, obviously, this region is part of the enormous forested Bajormi-Karaguli National Park area. End quote. Yeah, so very fascinating. By the time they had actually reached the crypt in 2008, I'm not sure when the initial find was actually made.
Yeah.
It had collapsed, but they did recover bones from the area. And this is the same area known for having 1.8 million years old discovery of an ancient species of human too, that sort of rewrites the narrative of, like, they're not arguing against Africa as being the sort of initial inception where humans, but they're just saying that this extends the narrative much further back.
Right.
And so they're kind of implying that perhaps there could have been a migration much earlier up into this sort of area of Georgia, Turkey, that type of Mesopotamia, ancient area.
Yep.
And that from there, this was kind of spawned Eurasian populations and then European.
Yeah.
So they actually did discover some bones. They took these bones. I saw a picture. We both saw pictures. They're massive.
Huge.
And they were presented to this scientist. His name's Professor Vakua, and he was the one who discovered the 8.5 million year old remains.
Right.
And he called it Homo erectus georgicus.
Nice.
But anyways, so he said that these bones are consistent with a person to be between 2.5 to 3 meters in height.
Once again.
And this is very sad because unfortunately he died before testing could be done. And this is just classic. We've seen it with Smithsonian, we've seen it in other places, but the Georgian Museum Archive lost these bones. Somewhere they're just mixed in with thousands of other bones and pieces, apparently.
How does that...
Frustrating.
My question is, like, how does that happen? That's not a thing.
I don't know, and I don't like it.
Come on.
But anyways, there's more.
Okay.
So the age of the ruins, they were able to project it to be about 1,800 to 2,200 years old. So not even that old.
No, that's not that old. That's not that old.
And then the speculative date was based on, this is a quote again, it was based on the type of cement used between the blocks that appears similar to Roman concrete. However, it may be much older as no testing has yet been done. And this is so remote. It's so hard to get to. Like, he had this whole, one of the researchers, because they teamed up with, was it the History Channel? It was something like that. And they were going to make this is back in 2013. Right. They were going to make a series about it called, like, Ancient Discoveries. I don't know. I can't remember.
I hope someone still does.
I really hope they do too. I bookmarked this page. I'm going to follow up with it and see what sort of came of that, because it's very interesting. But I'm just, it just gets my goat that no testing's done.
Well, it's like okay,
why would you be taking more samples?
You got a big crate of bones, and you just write generic, like on the box it just says bones, like you don't even say like what they are or something, and put it in a special spot. Like it's just like people lose their car keys. You don't lose
that is
archaeological
the thing
finds
about having archival museums and things like this, organizations that aren't properly funded by the government. So there's a lot of, like, I'm not sure what the exact situation was in Georgia.
Conspiracy hats on, tinfoil hats on. Obviously, if there was a find that was linked to potentially something like the Silver Swimmers, perhaps, so it gets covered up because there's some other private investigation or something like that, right?
Right, that sort of conspiracy theory,
We're not really too big into conspiracy theories.
I honestly, I would chalk it up more so to lack of funding and just lack of people caring.
Yeah, possibly. Because there's not really
a lot of people write this stuff off as just simple hoax and whatever, and they just don't even take it seriously. So, in that regard. But anyways, very, very interesting find. I want them to find those frickin' bones. Man.
I know, right?
But very cool. There's so many things. Like, I have another one from the 1950s. Did you have more that were like? I'm
already like at my theories.
Always has theories. All right. Well, I'm just gonna treat your ears to this little tidbit.
Give me the treat.
So again, we're going back to Mikhail Davydenko. And this was the guy we mentioned right off the top of the bat, that sort of confirmed he went and talked to those fishermen on Lake Baikal and got their stories as to, like, witnessing these frogmen launching out of the air and stuff. And he was a very well-known Russian writer. And he got around. He was actually in Tibet in the 1950s. Okay. And he was accompanying high-ranking Beijing and Soviet military commanders that were inspecting Red Chinese troops in the Xinjiang province of Western Tibet. Sorry, the Xinjiang province and Western Tibet. So they're kind of going all over. Okay. And so essentially what the group did is they spent a night in this Lamaist monastery. And Davydenko met this guy. He was like a monk, super old monk. And he spoke Russian. He was a Mongol. And they spoke about a lot of different things. One of them was this story about these caves that exist in the Tibetan mountains where giants, again, that are 3 meters tall, remain in anesthesia-induced sleep.
Interesting.
Isn't that weird?
Yes.
So they're almost like hibernating. And then it goes on to say that later Davydenko had heard stories that the Red Chinese had gutted one of these sacred caves, removed from there sleeping amphibian giants, and publicly hanged them.
Wow.
I wasn't able. I honestly, like, I feel like this is all just written in Russian, so I can't find it. But it was put in his book, Davydenko's book.
We're gonna have to track that down. We didn't have time to for this episode, but
we kind of we were too busy partying.
We were we were down in Vancouver, so
even though it was only 24 hours of filming,
it takes a lot out of you though.
It does. We were dead.
That is bizarre though. Amphibian giants.
And then he even goes on this little article here. They just kind of were talking about how the Nazis were quite aware of this, and they kind of. Again, like we've heard about the Nazis being in Castle Holska trying to sort of harness the gates of hell or whatever. Yeah. But apparently Hitler sent SS expeditions to Tibet because he was certain that these giant demigods would confirm his theories on, like, this whole Aryan superiority and whatever sort of nonsensical racist stuff that he was into.
So Aryan superiority originated with serpent-like creatures?
Right. Anyway, that doesn't really make sense.
Or, sorry, amphibian-like creatures, I should say.
I know, right?
Yeah, okay. Well,
so we get this tidbit, Tibet. Yeah. And Tibet, very close to Mongolia, very close, all that neck of the woods, right?
Well, it is. Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Coming from an international
for sure. No, it's Tibet, and then north of Tibet, you've got that mountain range, and then you're into, like, there's the Gobi Desert, which we touched on for the Deathlands.
And then on top of that, there's
And that's Mongolia,
Baikal.
North China, and then you keep going up, and then you're into lower Siberia, Baikal, those types of areas. So it is definitely in the range.
We should include some good maps for this one.
We'll have maps for sure. Yeah.
In the blog post, I'll definitely include
Absolutely.
that.
So that's bizarre.
And so it gets even more bizarre.
Okay.
Yeah, because I came across this guy named Rampalama. Rampalama, and he's a very controversial figure. Some people believe him, some people definitely don't.
Sounds like a DJ name.
Rampalama. Yeah, so I don't actually have a date for when he was in Tibet, but he was in the capital. So this is Lhasa, and that's where the Dalai Lama's palace is.
Okay.
And so essentially, he claims to have visited underground tunnels underneath this palace, where amongst many ancient pictographs depicting alien technologies and a lot of very foreign things that can't really be explained easily, he described an underground lake that stretches for miles beneath the Earth's surface. And so this is a quote from him. This is after an extensive journey underground through several flights of stairs and passages and whatever else. It's like a whole maze, seemingly. So this is from Rampalama, quote.
Okay.
It was black and still, with the blackness that made it appear almost invisible, more like the bottomless pit than a lake. Oops, did I get that wrong? I think I kind of butchered that one. But essentially, it was like, it was a very, very still, very black, very creepy, whatever. And he did see several remarkable things again. So on the walls, there was numerous unknown figures and strange geometric shapes, images of giants. And there's also depictions of, again, alien machines and incomprehensible stories and all these kind of crazy things.
So we've got the giants and the alien machines and that.
All sorts of weird stuff. And then they persisted further into these underground caverns, and they found what he described as like a niche, and there was like this like a black house is kind of what he described. And then within that, there was a sarcophagus which lay three sleeping giants that were gold. So these are almost like representations, is kind of, unless they were painted in gold. He was kind of vague on that one.
Okay. So like it was maybe...
This is the quote again. This is a better quote from him. Quote, I looked again, fascinated and awed. 3 gold figures, nude, lay before us. 2 male and 1 female. Every line, every mark faithfully reproduced by the gold. But the size... The female was quite long, 10 feet as she lay, and the larger of the 2 males was not under 15 feet. Their heads were large and somewhat conical at the top. The jaws were narrow, and with a small, thin-lipped mouth. The nose was long and thin, while the eyes were straight and deeply recessed. No dead figures. These looked asleep.
Interesting.
End quote.
You know, that just straight up reminds me of Prometheus.
Right? Yeah, totally. So fascinating. I'm still just trying to like categorize, make sense of all this guy. Like, I'm not really, but this was definitely something that I just stumbled across this morning too, but I thought it was so fascinating.
Yeah, I had to add that in for sure.
So
I mean, we've got all this, some of it's more, backed up, corroborated than others, obviously, but we have obviously a ton of evidence all over the Eurasian continent, in Siberia and elsewhere, for giant humanoids, offshoots of ancient humans that we didn't know existed. We've got sightings of UFOs and USOs linked to the lake and just to water in general that are also linked to sightings of 9-foot tall creatures, terrestrial, outside the water. So this is all, there's so many similarities. The commonalities are just, you can't ignore them.
It's exactly. There's too many commonalities.
So, I mean, are we getting into theories now?
I would say so. That wraps it up for me as far as
that wraps it up for me too, and I'm excited to get into theories because we've got obviously the silver swimmer theory as its own thing, and then the ancient civilization theory on a slightly broader scale to associate the swimmers with that. Like, where are they from? Are they from an ancient civilization? Are they alien? What are they?
Exactly.
What do you think? Where do you want to start off with?
Oh Lord,
I don't
even know.
Like, okay, so here's I've got stuff here. So like,
he's got stuff. Okay, he's got some.
Well, I mean, okay, so for the swimmers specifically, people have been theorizing what they could be, and some of the dumbest of those theories has to be like, for starters, the Nerpa. The seal, the freshwater seals, okay,
I forgot
that
about those guys.
Are indigenous only to Lake Baikal. They share no DNA with their ocean supposed, like, they're not from the ocean, right? Nobody knows how they got there.
Right.
They're different than their
genetics are completely different.
Yeah. So it's just this mystery as to how they were there. But they dive down to crazy deep depths, like really deep. I don't actually have the number right here, but they can hold their breath for a crazy long time, and people are thinking, well, must have just been some Nerpa. They're silvery gray, right?
Okay.
But they're only like 3 feet. They're not 9 feet.
Yeah, okay. Well, they're not humanoid.
And they're not humanoid, and they're not that,
things.
like, they're fast, but they're not going to be so fast that you're like...
And they're not going to shoot people out of the water with unknown technologies.
No. So, scratch that one off the list. That's a theory. Then we got, once again, just like the Ogopogo, we got sturgeon. So, the Baikal sturgeon. You know, if this was actually in Okanagan Lake or somewhere out here, I think this theory would actually have a little bit more weight, because the sturgeons out here are bigger.
Yeah.
Their colors match up more so, like silvery grays, different things like that. The ones in Baikal are brown.
Oh.
They're just straight brown. Yeah, like sturgeons here can be black, like they can be, they're dark, but they could have the appearance of shimmery silver. But these ones couldn't. They're brown. They're small. Like, they're nowhere near the size, and they don't exist at that depth for, like, consistently. And they wouldn't be ripping around, and presumably Russian military dive teams are not going to miss. Yeah, they're going to know what a sturgeon looks like.
Yeah.
It's not a sturgeon. Okay. And then I came up with this.
That's almost like insulting to
little
even
bit.
say that, because 3 people died and 4 people were seriously brain injured from that event.
Yeah. And people are
feel
just
like
like, oh, they probably just saw some unidentified large sturgeon.
No.
Dumb. That's the dumb theory of the day. Anyway, so I came across this other interesting thing, though, and this is just a folklore connection.
Okay.
It isn't actually associated directly with Baikal, but it is just generally associated with the lakes and river systems of the country, and there's a ton of rivers that lead into Baikal and oh my gosh, I'm already forgetting. Issyk-Kul.
What? No. Issyk-Kul is I can't remember the name for it, but I want to say it's an endemic lake where there actually isn't.
Okay, maybe it's just adjacent rivers then. Because there's definitely a lot of water systems in the area, and then there's ones that run into Baikal.
Because that was the interesting part of, like, Issyk-Kul. Is that
that's right, because it's saline, and that's right.
Out of the crust, essentially.
Right.
Or so the legends go, and I think that is supported by geologic evidence.
Nevertheless, this is still associated with both those lakes and the river systems near them. It's called the Vodanoi.
Okay.
Vodnyanoi. And basically it is a merman-like creature in Russian folklore.
Oh, cool.
And there was a cult of the Vodanoi, which is sort of stronger in the northern part of Russia, but it's also throughout the country. And yeah, it's essentially a merman with a tail and fins and a humanoid appearance that was the size of a man or larger.
That just brings me right back to the shark diver guy, right?
Yeah, so no helmet on that one. He could see the face.
And he saw some sort of, like, fin-like
And we'll include a picture of, oh my gosh, we got the bulldog in here making noise. Anyway, that's probably what these things sound like, similar to that. Sound like a monster.
She's fine.
Anyway.
Probably barely here.
So, isn't that bizarre? So that's a folklore legend, and it sort of matches the silver swimmers.
That is interesting.
Right?
Besides, like, the thing that's missing for me is the description of the feet. Like, do we get descriptions of fin-like things? I haven't seen any of that.
No, we just get the top.
I've got descriptions of, like, webbed hands.
Presumably if they're saying humanoid.
Because that was the one, the shark guy. He said that the one of the swimmers came up and sort of waved to them.
Oh.
And he could see that it was webbing.
Well, you'd think it would have to be if you're existing underwater, but that's the question of whether or not that's the body or the suit, right? Because we're dealing with suits or
if it's some sort of protective outer coating of some sort. But another thing too that sort of complicates that is if we're dealing with the same, like, can these be terrestrial too? Because we have that incident with the plane crash. Right.
And obviously if you have a fin, a merman fin, you're not going to be waltzing around for a little Sunday stroll on land. You're going to be...
And to be able to shoot out of that valley, that opening, like, he basically just booked it out of there, and then he just shot into the sky.
Right. Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Totally bizarre. So, I mean, so those are some of the I mean, the folklore one's not even a theory. That's just something I came across and I thought it was interesting because it was Russian based. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, do you think that there are
like some sort of cryptozoological entities? Like,
I mean, here are the camps: cryptozoological entity,
interdimensional,
extraterrestrial,
right,
so that they have a base underwater, but they are not from here, mm-hmm, or advanced ancient civilization,
right,
like primordial ancient humans,
yeah,
that somehow managed to, I don't even know, they have.
It's almost like they became underground dwellers. Yeah. And I'm just like picturing this would be such a great plot for like a fiction novel where it's like, it's almost like Cloud Atlas, where we get this like super advanced civilization. You get the collapse, you get the primitive civilization happening on top of that, and then we are that primitive civilization in this analogy, and we're slowly rising, growing, and then we've had this explosion of like industrial revolution activity in the last 150, 200 years,
yeah,
and now we're just kind of we've overtaken the world again in a different way, perhaps, than maybe these ancient civilizations that are gone now, but are residing. It's almost like the residual embers of the forest fire under the surface.
Yeah.
And they're just like
things that manage to, exist through,
but have no way of like sort of like reaching out and sort of like identifying with our culture and civilization.
It is alien in every sense of the word, but without the Hollywood connotation.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I definitely, I mean, obviously this happened. This was a real event that happened with these divers. This is declassified military documents that talk about this stuff. The sightings were real. People saw these men get shot up. People have seen these orbs.
Yeah.
And they're credible witnesses. They're military people. They're
Again, I'm not so sure about this. What was his name? Again,
not all of them are going to be, obviously. No, but that story is crazy.
It is pretty nuts.
That's insane. But nevertheless, even if that's just a folklore story, the commonalities of the 9 foot to 10 feet or larger, the giants, and then all these strange things in Siberia and Baikal. I believe that there is, I think that there's an ancient civilization at the bottom of that lake. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that it's like a thing that if we just send down a submarine we can see necessarily, because obviously
like James Cameron style.
Exactly. Obviously they're really good at not being seen if they don't want to be.
Yeah.
Just like all these other cryptozoological creatures, so to speak.
You even like claim that the silvery suits are some sort of cloaking apparatus as well.
Hey, doesn't that remind you of almost like Alien versus Pet Predator?
Oh, or that
with
too.
Like Predator, where he's got like the shimmery.
I was thinking
Harry
Goblet of Fire,
or with the cloak, with the invisibility cloak.
Or that too. Yeah, no, I was thinking of the underwater scene,
right.
Swimmers.
Oh no, yeah, totally, that's right.
There's if they're shimmery and they can sort of like, it's almost like again
some sort of a camouflage.
Yeah, camouflage similar to that fish that I couldn't remember the name of. Remember in that last episode where I was trying to make that analogy?
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called.
The cuttlefish.
The cuttlefish, yeah.
So, okay, so we have all of this. Yeah, you're leaning towards the ancient civilization.
And I'm leaning on that evidence in the caves, because we're finding out every day that there were human-like things that existed that we didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. And it's not as profound as finding a 15-foot tall or a 10-foot tall or whatever, giant skeleton, but it's still profound. This is a genetically different subspecies. Mm-hmm. That implies that it's like, ancient Neanderthal, whatever, they're banging rocks together, but that's just because of how our perception of like what we can see. The other thing about all this and archaeology in general that I always think of, it's like we're trying to study things that are so old already. Like, so if you're looking at something that's 70,000 years old and trying to decipher when it was made or how it was made, like, how, it's not that far off to think that there's way more evidence that we would have found, but has now just been lost because this is 70,000 years ago. Yeah. How many different civilizations have risen and fallen over the millennium that have destroyed or gotten rid of evidence of ancient civilizations? Then we just see them as the ancient civilizations, right? The Egyptians and the whoever's, they're all the ancient civilizations,
but maybe not so ancient.
Right?
Ancient, anyway, but not so ancient.
So that's where I'm at.
I tend to agree with that theory. I feel like that has a lot of credence. I always favor the interdimensional aspect. Like, what if these are, again, like you get these the bubbles of different dimensions, or say the pages of the book sort of spread out.
Right.
And you get these civilizations perhaps that are sort of almost like moving through the pages of the book or through the membranes of the bubbles, and they can sort of cross over into our, what we perceive of as the present, if they're from a past or
Right.
just a different
Yeah.
dimension. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so maybe that's how some of their technology is able to function the way that it is.
And we can understand it.
Yeah. Because I kind of had, like, you know, going back to the whole orbs and UFOs as USOs and sort of the interchangeability of that.
Yeah.
And that whole instant that we mentioned in 1994 in Australia about the orb-like thing that was spotted by so many people. And essentially it looked as if it was, like, sucking water.
Yeah.
The water sucker. And that's been reported, like, again, you were saying that, Rob Christofferson in his episode on, like, the LA...
I think it was that one. I can't remember exactly. But I mean, that's a common theme with UFOs.
It is a common
They're
theme.
Around water.
Around water. Lots of sightings around water. And what if they're, like... Because I'm just trying to make the connection between the cattle mutilations and the surgical precision of that, and how, like, perhaps this is some sort of attempt at experimentation. What if they're doing this with our marine life as well? You know?
Okay, so
That's
like in
why
the theory of there being actual like abductions or something like that could be an explanation for how
Or
why
not
there's
even abduction so much as like collecting samples. Or something, you know?
So that these silver swimmers and creatures like them could be
that's kind of
like
gets
experiments,
messy, though.
basically.
I don't know. I don't know how those silver swimmers would fit into that.
Yeah.
I was more so on a different tangent when I was kind of thinking along
I feel
those
like maybe
lines.
like if you're thinking along those lines, maybe that like they are, because like some people think that like extraterrestrials are actually just terrestrial. They're all terrestrials, either interdimensional or they're here.
Right.
And you know, the deep lake and the deep ocean is outer space, basically. Like you go down there, it's a different world, and you don't know what's down there.
Exactly.
Like we haven't made it to the bottom of every ocean, you know.
Mariana's Trench, man. What's down there?
I ain't going. I'll tell you that right now. I can barely make it to the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, screw that. I'm not even going into Okanagan Lake after doing Ogopogo episode.
This
Screw
summer,
that.
no, sticking to. We'll run through the sprinkler instead. Should be safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dunk in the creek.
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of wraps it up for me. Do you have any other alternative theories? You kind of settled on your...
I'm settled on that, and I will make one more reference because I'm going to try not to make this reference in every single episode, but it's my absolute favorite one that I pulled out of Lauren Coleman's book on Bigfoot.
And this ties into the seals a little bit. As far as like...
Yeah, the wood buffalo reference.
Yeah.
Now, the wood buffalo was thought to be extinct and was discovered by a bush pilot somewhere on the Alberta something border, can't remember exactly, but basically it was a herd that was self-sustaining of these wood buffalo that we did not think existed anymore. These are creatures that weigh, over 1,000 pounds. They're not small, like we should be able to find them or know that they exist, but guess what? The expansive territory of British Columbia and Alberta and crossing into California and all these different places is so massive, and so is Siberia, and so is the lake.
Yeah, and so they just go unnoticed.
There are creatures that exist that we don't know.
To add on to that, there was a line from one of those Bigfoot documentaries we were watching from BC, and I believe it was an individual from UBC. It was a professor, a researcher or something, and he made the comment, he was like, it's almost safer these days for Bigfoot type things, Sasquatches, to be around because there's less people traveling nomadically. Yeah. We're situated in our cities. We're safe in our little bubbles of our cities, and you don't get the same types of indigenous populations that are sort of traversing the land and connected with the nature. So therefore, in that sense, we're
and if that's the theory on land, then it's multiplied by however many times when you're looking at such a deep lake, because if that's the case, I mean, sure, there might be more fishing on the lake, so that's slightly different than saying, oh, now there's less nomadic indigenous peoples crossing the mountain range that would see a Sasquatch. But in the sense, it's the same because there's people aren't they're not diving down to these depths in the lake. It is a place where things can go unseen, and
it's a safe haven.
I believe they're down there. I believe in the skeletal finds as well.
Yeah. I'm really sad about the loss of those.
I think eventually maybe some of these things will resurface. Same with some of the Smithsonian lost things from Kincaid's Cave or lost bones as well, right?
Yeah.
But these things are out there. So if you're diving in Lake Baikal or Lake Issyk-Kul or the Black Sea or other places too.
So anyways, yeah, before we wrap this all up, we wanted to give a thank you to Raven Skillet for your lovely review.
Yeah.
We appreciate your feedback so much.
On the US iTunes.
Yeah. I love looking at those.
Totally.
We're just glad you're enjoying our approach, and we like to have fun with this stuff, but we do take it seriously at the same time. So,
thank you.
Nice balance. Thank you very much for that. As well,
we have a call to action.
Yeah. We wanted to put something out there for our listeners.
Yeah.
So, do you know anyone, or just someone? Anyone? Do you know anyone in this world? Do you know someone that is a fan of history, mysteries, anything to do with the paranormal, or is just a downright curious person, but has never listened to a podcast in their life? I know quite a few of those people out there, and I'm trying to convert them, man, because podcasting is radio of the future, in my opinion. Yeah. And so we want to challenge you guys to ask someone to give it a try. And obviously, if you know people that are already out there listening to podcasts,
pass it on to your friends.
Exactly.
That's the best way for us to grow the show, is word of mouth. And we appreciate the support so far.
It's the most effective.
So pass her along. Thank you so much.
We want to do some fun little interactive things on our social media this week too, so stay tuned for that. We'll have a post up tomorrow, Monday morning-ish, maybe Monday afternoon. Just with more details regarding that. And otherwise, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so.
I'm really excited. We've got a lot of really fun stuff, a lot of fun collaborations. I'm just going to allude to that. We're going to be making some announcements. And
we're branching out for sure. There's some fun guests going to be on in the next month to 2 months for sure.
It's going to be busy.
And so stay tuned for all that. And like Amber said, stay tuned for Instagram and Twitter tomorrow, because there's going to be some fun stuff for you guys out there. Yeah. So
we want to get you involved.
Yeah. So thanks again for listening.
Yeah.
Reach out to us on those platforms, or you can get to us at intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about the silver swimmers. We would love to hear your theories as well. And
we'll be back next Sunday with a whole new episode.
So thanks for joining us on Into the Portal, and we'll see you again soon.